Let's watch out for those. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
But I don't know of any easy way of getting there. The Science of Yoga book, which is one of the definitive subject matter exploration tomes that have come to us from ancient times, describes situations for some people that their karma blesses them, so to speak, and they can have the easy path towards those kind of experiences.
Yes.
The Science of Yoga suggests that about 20% of the populace has the ability, brings it with them, to have easy out-of-body experiences or be able to meditate easily or various different, you might want to think of as slightly extraordinary powers, so to speak, in particular areas.
Yes.
So some people, indeed, they can be transported to out-of-body experiences with, the flashing lights and the various different kinds of software.
Yes.
I wrote Vortex, which allows you to read from the computer at up to 2,000 words per minute, and it does this by presenting one word at a time and letting the computer splash into the screen for you in large type.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm relatively immune from the out-of-body experience triggered by flashing lights, probably as a result of the many years of using that as a tool for focusing.
Interesting. That's really, I know that there was I think it was a Japanese animation cartoon or something like that.
Triggered a epileptic
yeah.
in a lot of people.
Yeah. The flashing lights.
Frequency of vibration, and I had to work very hard, very diligently for months in getting the timing right on the vortex, just to avoid the kind of cycles that you could use that would trigger it. And even so, you can never be 100% sure you're going to avoid most people's triggers that way. So we have a warning on it.
Right. The visual frequency can really affect you. It's like whenever I turn on the fluorescent lights here in the studio. Within at least an hour of dealing with the fluorescent lights, I've got a major headache, and I feel it around the eye sockets, and it's because there is that frequency flicker that I know it's there,
right.
And it affects me, and I turn off all the lights, and I light some candles. Candlelight, and most people may not be fans of, running their home off of candlelight, but that seems to work the best for me, especially whenever I'm doing work on the computer or anything else. Any other type of electrical light bulb or fluorescent is the worst.
Fluorescent is terrible because of the cycles. That's exactly the case.
Yeah.
The fluorescent bulbs work by cyclically zapping a reactive gas with a charged electrical pulses, and it just so happens that they're keyed to the sine wave capacity of the charge,
yes.
or of the type of electricity that we have now.
Yes.
So in the case of the U.S., that's 60 cycles, which of course is very, very close to the actual lower level circadian rhythm that the eyes get into when reading. And so that's why you get the headaches that originate from the eyes, and the headaches probably appear to come in from the peripheral and from the lower side of the eye.
Yes. That's exactly right.
And it's just resonating with that cycle that your eyes are frequently moving back and forth in order to read naturally anyway. It's also unnatural to read from computer screens because it's an irradiated surface as opposed to a reflective surface.
Yes.
So there's a greater level of intensity there as well. So to actually aid your vision, you're probably better off with no overhead light if you've got a computer screen to read from, and then some kind of below the edge of the screen ambient light or indirect light. Candle would be fine. I don't like the idea of polluting my air, but the light idea would be great. I wonder if there's an artificial bulb that would replicate the candle light.
Yeah, indeed. And I know in 2012 they're doing away with what we know as the light bulb, and you have two choices. You have those little fluorescent squirrely ones, little pigtail type ones, or you have LED lights. They're completely doing away with what light bulbs we grew up with. They're
right.
Out the door. So I have 24 different pairs of sunglasses, and since I was in middle school, I've always worn sunglasses, and I've gotten so good at refining of exactly what UV level to use on certain days, partly cloudy, temperature, the whole bit, that and plus I'm blue eyes, so I'm extremely sensitive to light regardless, and I avoid the sun unless I've got really, really good sunglasses on. And people have told me, don't do that, it's bad for your eyes and everything else. But I found that it's the completely opposite, actually.
Well, this is probably wise, especially these last 8 years or so, that the sun has transited from yellow to white and increased its intensity.
Yes.
And it's producing a new kind of ultraviolet, so if you're ultraviolet sensitive to begin with, this is probably a good thing to avoid. However, of course, the downside is, especially now, that if you're avoiding the sunlight, then you're going to have to uptake vitamin D in supplement form to at least a couple of thousand units a day, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 units a day during the cold and flu season.
Yes, indeed. Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, let me see here. This one it goes back to the finances. It says, do you expect people to utilize ATM and point of service, POS transactions utilizing Caroline system, I believe it is?
Yeah.
Or does financial transactions dissolve? And if so, when do you expect financial transactions to stop, like i.e. month, year?
That's a real good question. If we follow because we like to take our linguistics and match them up to a real world, we always say, okay, has there been a recent example? How long did it take? And so on. And the best example of a modern state collapsing around currency is Argentina.
Yes.
And the ATMs functioned for about 3 days. That's what I would expect in our case as well, that once we get to the point where we have either a bank holiday or a major drop in the dollar such that there's a panic on the financial markets relative to it, and I'm talking I'm talking a panic that would involve, say, a week or more of activity around that, then 3 or 4 days later I would suspect that the ATMs will run out of cash, and that, yes, I think maybe the digital dollars, all of the representation of all of the supposed wealth that's stored in a digital format, just might disappear at some point. Month and day, well, the whole process really starts rolling on November 4th, according to our data of this year. And it takes a whole year for it, almost 2 days lacking a full year. And so November 2nd of 2010 is when we can say, well, by then it's mostly over, I would think.
Yeah.
That the Fed, as a Federal Reserve Bank, which isn't part of the federal government, has no reserves and is not a bank, and their criminal cabal will have been, we've started the process of expunging them in 2010, and by November of 2010, it's pretty much a solid, accomplished fact. There may be loose ends to tie up. So over the course of that period of time, from this November to that November, we'll probably encounter a point at which the ATMs cease to function, and banking as we know it will be radically altered, to say the least.
I remember when credit cards really started to hit the market in a sense. As a matter of fact, my father's first credit card was a Montgomery Ward credit card. And he thought, he looked at it as a novelty, in a sense. Like, okay, you have this, you can go and you can buy something, you don't really have the money for it, and they charge you a little extra. But his whole opinion and voice on it was, unless you're absolutely in dire need to use this thing, it makes no sense to use it, because basically all you're doing is you're paying extra and more for something that really you don't need, in a sense. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And now the average person holds at least 5 to 7 credit cards, and their entire existence is based off of credit. I have never, ever succumbed to that concept of credit. As a matter of fact, my credit's horrible when I pay for everything with cash.
Right.
But I don't have the stress of being, in a sense, a slave to that credit card. Unfortunately,
it won't benefit you much, because you'll still be wrapped up in the collapse along with everybody else.
Yes.
But at least you've had this period of time where you've lived reasonably debt-free, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, well, people also facing on the other side of this, the people that are facing problems from credit card collection. There's a marvelous e-book out there, and I can't think of the name of it, but the guy charges like $37 for it. Has all of the forms, everything you need to get these people off your case and also represent yourself well in court.
Yeah.
And again, anytime you take these guys to court, they can't prove their case.
Right.
The collection people that buy the debt from the credit card companies have no real All they've got is a digital kind of a transmission of that debt even existed.
Yes.
And when push comes to shove, they don't take the time to show up in court, and so you win. The majority of the time. If you can root out this book, like I say, it costs like $37, and it's about how to effectively deal with credit card collection and debt.
Yes.
And there's probably other sources for the same information, but now is the time to start using what's available in our legal system to your aid.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it was always funny because you always know that whenever it comes to these credit card or these collection agencies, the entire thing's ran on a call center. And so a computer is actually dialing the numbers, and it puts it into a particular pattern. So suddenly, and people will probably notice this, that suddenly they'll start getting calls from some debt collector that they haven't heard from in 3-4 months, and they'll call like every day, 4 or 5 times a day. It's because the computer is actually dialing it. And those are your opportunities to say, okay, well, let's see, let's work out a deal here. Let's negotiate what I owe you, in a sense. And if they say, no,
I'm sorry, I have to disagree.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my approach on that is that if you're being hassled by a third party or the collection has been sold, you need to stand up and refuse to pay. You need to fight these people in court, and it'll go away, because here's your problem. You will be absolutely, totally shafted by our system should you follow that approach. I mean, that would be the moral way, would be to harmonize with them and come into some appropriate circumstance. However, if you do that, say that, let's just take the idea that you're $100 in debt and you can't pay it, and they offer to settle with you for, say, $50. And you say, hooray, I've got $50, I'll settle with you. And you send them the $50. All is well and good. They send you a sheet of paper saying, okay, you don't owe us the $100 anymore. What you're unaware of is that the minute that they do that, the minute that they send you that letter and take your $50, they're also sending a 1099 to the government, and you will be taxed on the extra $50 there.
Really?
As though it were earned income for that year. And here's the real problem. They can add on any level of claimed fees and other kinds of collection extra funds that they want. And unless you dispute them, you are inherently agreeing to that. And so what they will do is this. They will say, oh, you owe $100, but with the extra interest and fees here, it's actually $150 or $200. And they get you real scared about that. So we'll settle for $50. And you say, oh, okay, fine. But because they've put the $200 down on paper, when you settle, then you get that 1099, not for the $100, not for the $50 that you didn't settle for, but for the $150, which included their extra fees.
Oh, my.
And that's taxed as earned income that particular year. Not a good situation.
Oh, so no, damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you play by the rules.
With the foreclosures as well, because now that the foreclosures have reached this stage, say that you've got into a situation where you bought a house for $800,000, not just throwing out like West Coast kind of prices. Okay, so you've got a house that you've got $800,000 in debt on. The value of the house has now dropped, and you can't sell it. You haven't been able to sell it for the last year. You're being foreclosed on, and the foreclosure guys have got it listed at, say, $400,000. Under most circumstances, if they sell it before it actually goes through foreclosure, you are stuck with whatever the difference is between the level of debt you originally started, the $800,000, and whatever they can get for the house. So if they can sell the house, sell it out from underneath you in a foreclosure process without actually going through the county and without getting the foreclosure notice authenticated by the court in what's known as a non-legal proceedings foreclosure, then the real problem is for you as the householder is the following. That if they sold it for $300,000, you're still on the hook for that $500,000, and they will either attempt to collect it from you, and they have a certain period of time that they can do that, or they'll send out a 1099, and you'll be on the hook for that $500,000 as though you earned it in income, and then you'll owe taxes on that.